Welcome back to Mindful Politics. Before I get going and before Leia's turtle goes away on screen, I want to just pull up Leia's turtle right there for everyone to see. Mr. Turtle floating away now. Mr. Turtle was like standing up, like with hands raised. It was very cute earlier, but we get to see. Thank you, Leia, for that. So anyway, welcome back to Mindful Politics, where we accept all kinds of beings on this show. Uh, I'm George Cow. I'm here with my friends Leah Cooper and Mira Rao. Both of them are in Australia, and it's interesting. Today, they happen to be about 30 minutes away from each other right now. Mira's in the car, not driving, thankfully. This is not politics in cars. And so I'm really excited to talk with both of them because we never talk politics, but we talk a lot about business and personal development, spiritual growth, that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited. Both Leah and Mira are content creators. You will find their links below to their videos on YouTube and any other links that they want to share below. So those of you who have been listening to the show, watching the show, know that we are taking a different. I'm bringing a different view to politics here, which is all about how politics shapes our own conscience, our own sort of way of treating other people and treating ourselves. And so I'm really, excited to talk with friends about their political history and how it's shaped who they are, and we can learn from each other. So, without further ado, let's go into our first segment, which is about our political histories. I will just say, those of you listening to this, hopefully you've heard the other episodes, or if not, I recommend them because in those other episodes, every single time I try to share a little bit about my political history or my political leanings. And so let me go ahead and set the timer up. I'm going to give Leah and Mira 4 minutes each. I'm going to just give myself 3 minutes just because I feel like every time I've already talked about my political history. So anyway, 3 minutes starts now for me. And I guess what I wanted to talk about today is, right now we're recording this shortly after Thanksgiving in the United States. And I don't know why it made me think about one of my neighbors who's already passed. I mean, I think he was only in his 50s when he passed. And we used to take walks together, walking our dogs together. And I guess he was really into making all kinds of really cool food. So maybe that's why I'm thinking of Thanksgiving, thinking about him, and also thankful for him because we had wonderful conversation together about all kinds of things about life. The thing that we always had the most dynamic, perhaps, conversations was about politics, because he and I, when he, this was a couple years ago now, when my political leanings were much more, you might say, progressive or leftist, and he was much more Republican, conservative, right-leaning politics. And so this is where we had we had disagreements, but we tried to keep it civil. And I tried to be curious about his views, and he asked me questions about my views. And our dogs got along well together. And so I miss him. I guess I want to say that. Like, I wish I had even more time. I feel like when we got into political discussions, there was some heat there that made me, uh, I wish I stayed more with my curiosity and learned more about his views. I guess that's the bottom line. I mean, the fact that he lived in San Francisco, where I live, he was like really interesting to talk to because, like, just about everyone else in the city, have progressive or left, politically left views, and he was like the only person I knew in my whole neighborhood who had right leaning views, and he passed too soon. And so I just want to encourage us to be aware of how short life is. We never know when we have people in our lives and when they can still be with us, and how much we can learn from them and explore their. I mean, I wish I asked more about his life and what kind of brought him to these views, and how that those views have served him, and how he's been able to keep those views despite being in everyone around him disagrees with him, probably, because of our cultural leanings in this city. So that's all I wanted to say. I miss him and wish he were still here, and wish I could still have those conversations with him. So, all right. With that, I will just give Leah and Mira a chance. If you want to reflect back anything you heard that you want to say. Maybe Leah, you can go first if you like.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, George. And thank you for sharing. It's really interesting just hearing about, you had this common connection of walking with your dogs, but this, I guess, separate ideologies around politics. And yeah, it's interesting that you say, you'd really like to better understand how he came to have those views. Because I think from my experience and people I know, there's generally certain things that trigger people specifically to think a certain way politically, with experiences they've had either, in their lives or in their business or something like that, which makes them want to align themselves to a certain point of view. So it would have been, really interesting to work to better, get some light onto why he had those thoughts. But yeah, it's very sad to hear that he did pass too soon and you didn't get to have those conversations. But I'm sure the time you spent with him was amazing and you really had some fun walking your dogs together. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Mm.
he actually even watched Buddy for a week while we were on the trip. So I'm really grateful for him for all his.
Yeah.
He was like one of the most supportive, honestly, one of the most supportive people and good neighbors that I knew. So, so
Mm.
thanks. Mira, just anything you want to say?
Well, a couple of things that made me kind of giggle off the back of the dogs. I was like, oh yeah, the dogs don't care.
Yeah,
You know, they're
exactly.
such good role models for us, Oh, they're like sniffing each other's, we'll say, jackets. Are you red or blue over there?
Right. Yeah, yeah, so true.
And also I think you kind of took me by surprise a little bit, George, with the, although I don't know why I'd be surprised given it's you, but the depth and pathos of remembering that, especially around politics, people can get so attached and so heated and so deep and so fixed. And to remember impermanence, right? The truth of, like, we do not know actually how long we're here. Every moment is precious, and our political conversations are precious. The person that we're having that conversation with is precious. And to remember, I wonder if we all had that mindset very intentionally when we were engaging in those kind of conversations. I guess that's what you're trying to do here, like, right? How different they might be.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear about your histories. And Mira, since we're already talking, do you want to take the next
Sure.
segment? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So kind of how I got to where I am now. Is that the?
Yeah, yeah. In about 4 minutes.
Yep. All right. Let me look here. Um, well, I was reading back through the prep materials again, and I probably have some similarities with you, George, in that in more recent years, I've backed away from activism. I was very active in my 20s and at university, and I was chained to logging machines and gates and stuff in the forests in Australia back in the 90s, and was very active. Lots of protests, lots of sit-ins, and along the lines of mindful politics, I think my hero, because I came to realize being involved in a lot of those demonstrations didn't feel that great, and the energy of them wasn't that great. So it actually culminated. I remember the moment we did a protest about what the university was doing, and we did a sit-in, and we were meant to just go and occupy and sit there in the administration. And then that energy of the crowd came, and people were smashing photocopiers and throwing things out the windows. We all ended up expelled from the university. And I was able to plead my case and get back in. But I remember thinking, what's this? Like this whole energy that gets riled up in people. This is not what you're enacting is not where you're saying you want to go. So around the same time, I came across the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh and the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and he was in the middle of the Vietnam War, sitting up on the mountain going, oh, I don't think me sitting up here getting enlightened while my brothers and sisters are getting bombed is what it's all about. And so he founded this school called Engaged Buddhism. And they went around the country. I won't go into all the big details of it, but basically using mindfulness, using Buddhist tools to engage in nonviolent protest and participation. So they'd rebuild schools after they were bombed, etc. And he was like, if we're going to do a peace rally, let's be peaceful. So they would walk very slowly, very quietly. They would sit down and meditate. And that's where I came to realize that whole dichotomy of there has to be this balance. And I think I'll be really interested to hear what you both have to say about this, because pulling away totally, I don't think is the solution of like, I'm going to get enlightened inside and let the world do what it does. But to engage in an angry way with an angry consciousness, with war inside myself, also isn't effective. And so I think I don't know where I am in that. That's where I am now. I'm sitting with, ultimately, in my role, I work in healing arts and profession. I believe that we really, really do need to end the war inside, and that those that can then contribute in a non-violent, non-warring way with those around us. And then hopefully that ends the, external war that then creates more wars inside each individual. So exactly what that looks like, I'm still exploring.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'll do my 1 minute reflection here. I felt so moved actually about what you said. This dichotomy between the angry young activist, smashing things, which feels righteous and good when you're doing like this. We are in the right. We are, it's like we are desperate for a better world, and then the Thich Nhat Hanh, which kind of almost brought me to tears, because his life and his presence is so healing for so many people. And like I feel like in the longest term, like that kind of energy is on the right side of history, like maybe not in the short term. Like people feel like they need to smash things in order to create good change, but in the longest term, we look back and go, yeah, that's the energy that actually creates a more beautiful world. So thank you for bringing that interesting, that juxtaposition. So, well, Leah, anything you want to reflect on there?
Yeah, I just love you sharing there, Mira. Thank you so much. And it actually sparked some memories for me as well. I hadn't chained myself to a bulldozer or anything, but I do remember going on several marches against uranium mining and doing some other activist things in my 20s. And sort of made me think about, why did I stop? And I haven't quite recalled exactly why, but yeah, just brought about some memories and some thoughts on that front. And yeah, and you also made me think of something someone shared with me, I think last year, about it was called slow activism or intimate activism, where instead of being aggressive and like you said, doing those really hardcore things, trying to, but taking a more gentle approach, like writing little messages and putting them in little places where people will find them, or sending love notes to politicians about something, and maybe with a gift or with something handcrafted as well, and being more gentle in that approach rather than the sort of fighting in an aggressive way.
I love it. I've never heard of that. That's really, really cool. And Mr. Turtle wants attention, as you can
Yeah,
see. He's like,
great.
making sure he's in the view. He, is on screen and doing his gentle activism. So, Leah, why don't we go to your 4 minutes, and you can, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, George. I can't see the timer, so I'm not sure.
Oh,
If
there
I
it is.
started it.
Yeah,
There
here
we
it
go.
is.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think for me, I've always been a bit curious about politics, but never wanting to get too deep into it. I know my parents were very liberal. I know in Australia we've got this Liberal and the Labor Party. They're the two major parties, and my parents have always been very liberal focused for their own reasons. And I've always preferred sort of the more green parties, I feel more aligned to that. What you said at the start about, you said the word beings, and it made me think that a lot of politics is focused on human beings, but not necessarily focused on every being that is on this planet. And I think as humans and having the power and control that we have on, resources and, our numbers are so great that we really need to consider other beings on this planet as we, go about politics and, things like the animals, the oceans, the forests, they all play an important role. And if we don't consider them as part of our political standing, then we're really doomed, I think, in the long term. So I've always had that on my mind, and try to, mindfully bring that when I'm voting or, considering who to vote for, understanding what their views are on the environment and nature, because I think that's really important. Interestingly, I remember when I was really young, my dad said that he wanted me to be prime minister, and that was like, what? I was like, what? And I'm like, how the hell would I do that? And haven't gone down that path. I don't like the idea of I don't like in politics, like it just, to me, when I see politics in Australia, I see, people shouting at each other in the House of Representatives or the Senate. There's lots of arguing and they're not treating each other. There's none of this, compassionate dialogue. It's very shouting down people or not, interrupting them. Obviously, there's times and places where they're not allowed to do that, but the things you see on the TV or in the news, you get this idea, especially for women in politics, it's a very male focused energy, very, very yang energy, very sort of buddy, and that sort of dominant male energy that we sort of think about, more from maybe the 50s, 60s and 70s, where it's a bit more boys club type of thing. And it's really hard for women to shine through, I think, in Australian politics. There are definitely more women now showing up in politics in Australia and having more dominant roles. And we have had a female prime minister at one point in the not too distant past. But she copped so much flack for just being a woman, and she wasn't married and, but she had a partner, and they were more concerned about what she was wearing and what her hairstyle was like than actually what she was trying to get done politically. So, yeah, I think for women especially, it's hard. And it's not something I would write off, in the end. I have an interest, but in the current way it's set up, I don't feel that I would, it's for me. So, yeah, I've spoken to my local member of parliament recently about some things that were important to me, and I have a rapport with her. Like she does a lot of things socially and she's easy to talk to. So I know that if I want to get my voice heard, that I can go see her, and I feel that gives me some power as well. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at politically speaking. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Turtle is at it again, standing
Yeah.
and
My
those of you
right-hand
watching
guy.
the video can actually see that. It's very cute. I'll go with my 1 minute first. It's Thank you for saying about the masculine feminine thing, because I grew up vaguely remembering, because I grew up in Taiwan most first 6.5, 7 years of my life. And like Taiwanese politics, at least back then, like it was like caricatured as like people literally fighting in the political chambers. Like that's what it was known for. I don't know why. I'm not a fighter. No. But then thankfully in recent years, the Taiwanese president now, and I think the previous term is a woman. So I'm like, that's pretty impressive, how long it's come. And yeah, Taiwanese politics also like one of the first Asian countries to like accept gay marriage. One of the still one of the few, I think. So I guess that's kind of part of my part of my genetics, perhaps, is in there. And I just one more thing. I say, this is Leah for Prime Minister, and this is your coming out on this show. This is your announcement. I'm so grateful to
Heard it
have
first
that.
here.
No, that's great. That's who knows. All right, Mira, you can have your reflection time now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just love that. I'm so curious as to what motivated your dad, what why he would say that. And I think, I love it. I think it's adorable. And yes, do it. I really appreciated your comment about how limited our thinking is as well, I think, around how we account for what's important in politics in regards to focusing on human beings and human interest, and only a very narrow version of human interest. And it's not a very holistic or connected to the planet and the rhythms of the planet and everything else, or even the holistic experience of being human, right? It's like there's just what we see in the system, in the political system as it is, and in the way that people who get into it and the way that it plays out is such a narrow and, I want to say, poor, like it's missing so much of the richness of the full expression of human experience and planetary, cosmic, galactic, everything. If we really take into account our role as citizens, as humans, as citizens of the planet, as citizens of the galaxy, it's like we are way beyond. Although those things are important, I don't want to say they're not, but, just simply, does everybody have a job and is everyone making money? There's got to be more to it than those really simplistic things that keep getting put on the table and fought over.
And thank you. This is great. Keep going, because we're going to go into the second segment where we each get another 4 minutes. So, Mira, keep going on that. I think that's really important. Yeah, I want to hear
Riff
more.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I was listening to, Gabor Mate, the doctor, is doing the rounds at the moment with his Myth of Normal book and culture and civilization. And he was referencing, and I'm not great at remembering specific facts and statistics, so the names of different peoples, but it was a Native American tribe, I believe. I think he had a friend who was also a doctor that had come from that community, who was talking about how when someone in their community got sick, everybody in the community considered themselves sick. They were like, thank you to that person, because you've shown us if any part of our system is out of balance, it means that we're all implicated in that. And so there was this, and I think a lot of Indigenous cultures do this a lot better than our culture. There's a real recognition of the interdependence and the interconnectedness of all things, and that idea that we are stewards of a whole system when we're human beings on a planet. We're not just here for extracting what we can, right? Because that's kind of almost, doesn't matter what country these days you're in. That's the dominant paradigm that's going on, is this sense of what can I get out of the system? And then and I think it's just gotten part of our polarization, and maybe part of, I don't know, George, but you're kind of backing away, and certainly mine is because it's just become that energy that I talked about from my youth that I experienced has become even more intensified. There's even less capacity, it seems like, for people to care about each other and care about deeper values, like what's really underneath this, and care about the deeper values of being a human being, and the characteristics. And we've just come into completely about what can I get and what's in it for me, and all about our individualized, atomized selves. And I don't know, I have no solutions at this point. I have no sense of, because I take on board the criticism of the flip side. I was watching how am I going for time? I'm watching here, but I can't see the timer. A couple more
we got
minutes.
another minute and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. I was watching a documentary, Adam Curtis, I've forgotten the name of it. It's a 5-part series, very good, The Century of the Self, and looking at the kind of cultural influence of psychology within marketing, within business, and how we came to be so self-focused as a culture. And even within, this is the part we were kind of playing with before, and why I look to Thich Nhat Hanh as such a model, because to then go, oh, well, I'm just going to move into a holistic thinking and get really spiritual, there can be this retraction. And even within a spiritual mode of looking at things, there can be this disengagement from the whole, which includes, as in your beautiful story at the beginning, Republicans, ugly things, people we don't like, people we don't want to talk to. And so going off and meditating myself into a state of enlightened consciousness, isn't necessarily the full picture of what is needed.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. I guess I'll do my quick share, and then Leah, you can reflect and also have your 4 minutes as well. So I love that so much. This idea that, I mean, this conversation thus far has been about, I guess, holism, right? Like bringing more holism back into politics, because like recently we had an election here in the States. It was midterms elections, like, smaller issues. And I remember someone came knocking on my door and said, "Oh, I'm here representing the hotel workers union, and please vote." I forgot what it was, like yes on this or no on that. And I said, "Okay." And that's all I knew. Like that's all I knew about the issue. Like and that's all they wanted me to know. Like, I'm from the union, and this is good for us. You should vote this, and that's it. And there was no like connection to what's the bigger picture here. Like why? Yes, of course I want to support you guys, but it's basically whoever comes to my door more, or the person I get to talk to. That's all I know. I'm going to vote what they said. And that's what how most people vote. Like, oh, I know someone so, and they want me to vote that. Okay. And there's no like care for a larger picture about principles, or like how does this connect. And anyway, so yes, that was interesting. Leah, you why don't you reflect and also share whatever else you want to share. I'll just give you 5 minutes, and you can
Yeah.
take it from there.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what you said, Mira, about the person getting sick and how the whole community felt it was it was on their shoulders as well. And you kind of think about how COVID happened, and you think, well, if COVID happened, imagine if the world had looked at it from a perspective of, wow, these people are sick. We're obviously not doing something right as a human society for this sickness to occur. So let's look at what we can do to improve the global situation, rather than locking borders and making people get vaccinated and things like that, which are reactionary rather than like that holistic approach. And I just think, imagine imagine what the world would be like. Wouldn't it just be a completely different place? Yeah, so I really love that. And and your point about the extraction, what can we get out of this? It seems to be a lot of what, I mean, I don't know, it's probably a generalization, what people go into politics for, but there's power, there's getting your point across. Obviously, they have some sort of social conscience to some degree, otherwise they probably wouldn't get into that. So they want to, use their power for the greater good. But, whatever good is, good is good. Good is different to different people. what what is considered good. So, I always find that very interesting as well. And just moving on from there, my thoughts and what I guess I kind of see politics as a bit dirty is the whole lobbyist idea of people lobbying. And I think there's obviously good lobbying and bad lobbying. I've been member of, a environmental organization that does lobbying, for environmental issues. But of course, we all know that there's other organizations, companies, businesses that lobby for other types of things, mining companies and whatever, guns, I know that's a big thing in America, no doubt. So there's always all these other vested interests. And yeah, it's like you said, George, about the person coming and knocking on your door. They want to, they're from this union and they want you to vote for this because that's good for them, but not seeing the whole picture. And I think a lot of people can get Yeah, it's like, what's going to suit my needs? What do I need to feel like I'm safe and I'm, able to live my life comfortably, and not looking at the bigger picture, not taking into many other viewpoints. And it is challenging, because there's so many people and there's so many viewpoints, and we can't necessarily satisfy everyone. And something that I love and something I've heard in the not too distant past was about a country somewhere. I can't remember which country. It's somewhere in Asia, I think, and Bhutan, maybe. I think, and lots of countries. It's the GDP that focuses on where they're going to invest and grow. And but this country, Bhutan, I believe it is. They have this gross happiness product or something, like, rather than looking at the economic side of looking at how is our country happy, like making that the focus of their political endeavors. So, and happy in a holistic sense rather than an economic sense. I think economics drives a lot of politics more than it should. I think economics is just a construct of humanity. It's just an idea, really. It's a concept, rather than being a whole being, which is part of who we are, how we came to be on this planet, and seeing the environment and how we interact with the environment. Without the environment, we can't have economics. So, putting the environment aside means that we're going to be faced with some harsh truths in the not too distant future. So, yeah, it's kind of scary. And I wish that more people would think about that when they go to vote or when they go into politics. But I know you can get swayed with certain lobbyists, perhaps, or other people, and maybe sometimes the power that you thought you would have gets lessened because it gets diluted, or diverted, or those sorts of things. So that's what I wanted to share.
Mira, I'll give you a minute. We have a bit of time, so you can have 2 minutes if you want to reflect back on anything you heard. Go ahead.
I'm bouncing back from what Leah commented on, that idea of the sickness and the connection, and how different the last couple of years might have been if we really considered ourselves connected. And I think what struck me as well was what you said right at the end there about how real we make economic constructs and how much we take them for granted in politics and how much they drive things, and yet they're not. Money is not the same as a piece of fruit that actually exists in the world, that's given from the energy of the planet and that is real. It's the system that is very arbitrary. I remember when I studied accounting, I was like, we just make it up and decide and agree, and then that's what it is, but it's not actually a thing. And for that to be the thing, it's important that people are not starving, and it's important that we have, I think, an awareness of prosperity and abundance for each other. But I think the part that strikes me is just how unquestioned it's become and how rapid it's become. And it's like all these things that are actually made up are put in as real things and just assumptions from which we then talk and make decisions and make conversations. It's like, hang on, we need to actually wind back a step here and go, are we even going after the right things? Are the things that we even put as the foundational, fundamental aspects of our society and culture really, really right? And I think that's maybe why it's so freaking hard, George, like what you're talking about. It is slow, it is deep, it's like, I can imagine it would feel overwhelming. I too had someone suggest I go into politics, Leah, when I was younger. I was like, oh no. No, he's like, but you're so argumentative.
We could start our own party, Mira.
It sounds like this is going to happen now, and I'll move to Australia too, and we could do this. Thank you. We have just. I'll just let's go into our final round. I'll where we just get another 3 minutes if you want to share any final message for this episode, and I guess I'll start and I'll do my timer thing. This is all making me think about how, you know, if we want to get out of the individualistic, selfish, consumerist way of living and interacting with each other, um, we need time to like educate ourselves, right? To learn about the issues. And I feel like that's where there's so little, there's no cultural like assumption that you should give yourself that time or that you should make that time. Like I still remember like in school, we used to have a civics class that was like alongside, well, of course, obviously math and English and science and social studies and all those things were important. And civics was just like one little like elective you could take like once in the 4 years of high school, and that was it. And it's kind of a joke. Like we went to civics class and we were just like watching documentaries and movies and like I didn't learn anything from that class. It was kind of a joke. And I knew that other friends in other schools were also, we never thought about the civics class being important. Um, and yet, if we want to actually have a planet and a society that is healthy and connected, we need to take the time. It's just like we take time to watch television or to do our hobbies or anything like that. It's like maybe as individuals and as families we should start to assume that there is time we spend not necessarily every day, but like once a week or even once a month to like talk about issues that matter. And if we live by ourselves, to study that ourselves and to talk to others. I mean, this is really why I am doing this podcast. Right now it's being heard by my wife and the upcoming guests who want to hear how the other episodes went. But that's the whole point. It's like I wish that everyone would carve it. I'm forcibly carving out the space to think about these things at least once every 2 weeks, for myself and to stay connected to bigger issues than my own business and my own, consumerism. And so that's what I hope. I hope everyone listening to this will consider. I mean, again, an accountability system is, what if you started your own podcast? Just talk with your friends, invite them to this kind of conversation. At least then you'll talk about it once a week or once every month or however often you want your podcast to be. So that's my pitch for everyone starting their own mindful politics podcast, I guess. So that's anyway. That's all I wanted to share in this time. But 3 minutes from both of you. Who wants to share first? Leah, how about you? We can. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to say thanks for having this podcast and having the opportunity to share these thoughts and have a discussion. I think it's a great first step. And you say to have these discussions with friends and family, and I think that's where people get a bit unhinged, is because people have such strong views, like we've sort of alluded to already. But it would be interesting, like you said at the start, to better understand why they have those views. And I know specifically why my parents had or have views, political views, and vote a certain way. I question their reasons, and something's happened in the past. Does that necessarily mean it's always going to be that party is going to support you in the future? Things have changed, your circumstances have changed. Consider other options. And I think it's good to have an open mind, but I know people can get quite closed-minded on these issues because they feel so deeply or strongly about a certain topic or a certain way of thinking. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to work out how we do have these conversations in a way where we can be compassionate and listen and hold space rather than necessarily get into a fight. You know, a lot of people, you know, I've seen things on Instagram where people are, you know, interviewing politicians perhaps from two different sides, and, you know, they're basically talking over each other, and, you know, and it's just hard to follow. It's tense. It doesn't make you feel good. You know, and especially when there's, like, for instance, I've seen, you know, a male and female from opposite parties, and you feel like the male's talking over the female, and when you know, when she's trying to have her piece, whereas she just listens when he's talking and doesn't necessarily interrupt him as much as he did her. So, you know, she's demonstrating those more listening skills. But yeah, so how can we, I guess, come to an agreement of how we have these conversations so that they're productive and enjoyable rather than negative or, you know, confronting. So yeah, that's sort of my thoughts on that.
And I feel like every political show needs beings other than humans in the frame, just like
Yes.
Leah has Mr. Turtle. It's lovely. Thank you so much for that. And actually, Leah, as we're closing out here, do you want to introduce yourself a bit more, like your business, where people can find you, or what can they expect from your YouTube or your podcast?
Yeah, thanks, George. Yeah, so yes, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm passionate about health and well-being. I have a YouTube channel called The Center of Key, and I'm sure George will put a link in the notes below the video and in the podcast. Yeah, so I'm very passionate about health and finding our own path to health and using that as our compass to move through life in a holistic and loving way, ensuring that we're, you know, treading lightly on the planet and looking after ourselves as best we can. And I also have a podcast, actually. I'll just jump in. It's called The Wellbeing Room. So yeah, I'd love to. And I've interviewed George on that podcast as well. So it was a great pleasure to have him.
Spirituality. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was really nice. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Put the links below for sure. Mira, you get 3 minutes, and also introduce yourself too. Yeah.
Sure. Well, what I thought about that came up for me based on what both of you said was like mindful politics as a practice, right? And there's the two aspects of our own self-regulation. You know, Leah, you were talking about people getting really heated. One of the reasons why we avoid these conversations is too much intensity in the system. Like, oh, I don't want to risk that relationship, and it's too hard. It's the too hard basket because of how each of us is individually within. And then there's the flip side as well of practicing mindfulness in that interfacing with another being and with another human and with their perspective and their conversation, and still showing up for it. So that's kind of what came to my mind. Was like, okay, maybe it's about having this as a practice and being able to, like you said, George, have that space and that time to go a bit deeper. And it made me think about, there's a real political hot button between me and my partner. So we're together all the time, and there's this zone of we're not quite sure if we see eye to eye, but maybe we do, but maybe we don't. But it's created these divisions in the past, and we've got plenty of time, right? So we deliberately do this. We keep revisiting and trying to. I'm going to regulate myself. We're going to listen much better. Each person, not jump in, not interrupt, not say my point. Like, let me understand you first, let me stay internally centered enough that I can just let your perspective come to me. I can hear it, I can process it, and I can imagine, and maybe that's it. Maybe, like you said, just all of us, again, it's that movement of like all of us that maybe have retracted a bit from this zone because of how it's been, coming back into it in a more mindful and a way, and in a spirit of practice. We're not trying to get it right. We're not trying to change the world, because that was definitely like, young 20s activism is this has got to work, and then the disillusionment when it doesn't. And it's more about a very slow, underlying, holistic, as you said, we're talking about holism shift. And maybe I'll use that actually to segue into talking about my work, because that is what I see myself doing. So I work with individuals. It's called embodiment and resilience practice. And it really is about healing the impacts of trauma, the wounds within that we carry that create barriers between ourselves and ourselves and other people, because of emotional dysregulation, because we have forgotten the very natural instincts and abilities that we're talking about here, really, of being centered and being calm. We have to learn them again. So the embodiment piece is really a hat tip to the types of tools I use, which are yoga based as well, like Leah was talking about, and really about having a sense of our connection to ourselves, each other, the world around, that we feel inside, that we actually experience as something we feel, that we don't just think about. And in terms of seeing my thoughts and practices and teachings, main two places would be Facebook and Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel and LinkedIn, and I'll give George all of the links. But yeah, probably most active at the moment on Instagram with new content.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, you've heard from two aspiring or potential politicians. No, but at least feel like new leaders for a healthier world. And thank you both so much for this, for showing up for this. Not everyone I asked, actually most of the people I asked didn't say yes to this conversation. So I'm really grateful for your courage, graciousness, willingness, to have this. So thank you everyone for watching or listening. Thank you, my wife, for watching or listening. and the upcoming episodes soon, very soon, I'm going to start getting into actual thorny issues, specific hot button issues, and then try to bring a more mindful politics view to it. So I'm looking forward to that, because I need to educate myself on many, many issues. So thank you again for being part of this experience. I hope this will inspire all of us to make some more space to think about and to talk about what matters, besides our own, personal little lives, and hopefully we can make the world better as a result. So thank you, Leah and Mira, for being here, and thanks everybody.